Well, here we are in session number 13 of Micah, moving to chapter 5 and the first 4 verses. In chapter 5, Micah moved further into Jerusalem's exaltation, shifting all the way to the end times. The focus will be on the Messiah's work while on the throne of David. The initial scene involves Jerusalem's call to arms to muster troops to combat all the nations that will be allied against her and lay in siege against her. That will happen about the time of the return of Christ. But Micah points to something extra. Judah's king being insulted by a slap across his face. Let's look at Micah 5:1. Now muster yourselves in troops. He's speaking now to Jerusalem. Now muster yourselves in troops, daughter of troops. They have laid siege against us. They being the nations, of course. They have laid a siege against us with a rod. They will smite the judge of Israel on the cheek. And here, judge of Israel is the king of Israel. Some feel that Micah was doing a play on words, Sobet versus Sebet. If you're into Hebrew, you may have some interest in that. The suspicion is that the king was King Zedekiah, who was put on the throne by Nebuchadnezzar to replace the last of the Davidic kings, Jeconiah. And there's an entire story built with respect to Jeconiah too. And there's also one with Zedekiah. First, Zedekiah bore some similarity to northern kingdom's last king, Hoshea, Hoshea, not the prophet, but the king. Hoshea had paid tribute to Assyria for years to keep Assyria off her back, the northern kingdom's back. Then he rebelled and refused to pay tribute. Assyria followed by destroying the northern kingdom and exiled most of her Israelite population, replacing them with Gentiles. That's how we came to, in the New Testament, the notion of the Samaritans as a hated half-breed people, because they were a mix of the few Jews who had been left with Gentiles brought in by Assyria. Now, Zedekiah did much the same kind of thing. He paid tribute to Babylon once he was on the throne, but one day he rebelled and refused to pay to Nebuchadnezzar. Babylon destroyed Jerusalem and the temple, and many Israelites were expelled, were exiled. Zedekiah was captured, his sons executed before his eyes, which were then gouged out of their sockets. You can find that in 2 Kings chapters 24 and 25. And Hezekiah spent his remaining days blinded and in exile. While I indicated that Micah was moving toward end times prophecy, his first verse could well have described Babylon's siege of Jerusalem. In verses 2 to 4, we'll see a timeline of important biblical events. So let's begin in chapter 5, verse 2. But as you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, too little to be among the clans of Judah. In other words, this Bethlehem, there were 2 Bethlehems, but this one, which was just about 5 miles from Jerusalem, was considered a little bitty town. Nothing worth mentioning. From you, one, that's with a capital O, one will go forth for me, this is Yahweh speaking, to be ruler in Israel. So from Bethlehem, near Jerusalem, will come a person who is going to go forth for Yahweh as his ruler on the throne, and it will be the throne of David. And then it finishes up this verse 2. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. So, what's verse 2 speaking about? He's speaking about the first advent, the incarnation of God the Son as the man Jesus, who would be the Christ, the Messiah. So there's a famous verse, I'm sure you've heard it before. The names are key. Bethlehem means house of bread. Ephratah, fruitable region. It was, in fact, a region of grain production just south of Jerusalem. So, that which was to be the hometown of King David. Ephratah was required because, as I mentioned a minute ago, there was also Bethlehem in Galilee. And the one, of course, Jesus Christ, the Messiah, promised so very long ago. Remember, this is prior to probably 722 BC, so this would be, almost 3,000 years ago that Micah made his prophecy. And the goings forth are from long ago implies that the Messiah pre-existed the first coming and was, in fact, the second person of the Trinity. That one was, in fact, deity. That one was God, Yahweh, in essence. And Yahweh will take his hands off Israel for a period of time between the first and the second advents. Actually, he probably took his hands off Israel a bit before that, but we'll go with that notion that the times of the Gentiles, as is spoken, started sometime around the incarnation. Micah 5, verse 3. Therefore he, Yahweh, will give them, Israel, up until the time. What time? When she, Israel, who is in labor, has borne a child. Then the remainder of his brethren will return to the sons of Israel. She who is in labor will have her child, Jerusalem, and the second advent. Again, Micah had set this up earlier, back in chapter 4, verse 10, I think it was. She said, he wrote, "Writhe and labor to give birth, daughter of Zion, like a woman in birth, childbirth. For now you will go out of the city, dwell in the fields." That's mean you're going to be exiled. Dwell in the field means you're going to run or walk to Babylon, and so you're going to go to Babylon. There, in Babylon, you will be rescued. Then the Lord, Yahweh, will redeem you from the hand of your enemies. So that was the prophecy giving as a metaphor of a woman in birth, It says you're going to be exiled. You're going to walk to Babylon. You're going to stay there in exile, from which God will return you and redeem you. So Jerusalem and all Israel will be in travail in the gap between the first and the second advents. Revelation 12 in the first 6 verses tells us some of these things, at least a parallel to them. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars, 12 being key. And she was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and horns. And on his heads, 7 heads, were 7 diadems. And his tail, this, remember, is a dragon, and his tail swept away 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth he might devour her child. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, and where she had a place prepared by God, so there she might be nourished for 1,260 days. And 1,260 days was what? 3.5 years? Or 2.5 years. Sound familiar? The times of Gentile domination of Israel. Hosea made a similar prophecy to the northern kingdom. Let's go to Hosea and take a look at that. Hosea 3, verses 4 and 5. For the sons of Israel will remain for many days without king or prince. So there's going to be a time when Israel, the northern kingdom, will have no king, no prince. And they did not. They were wiped out as a nation. Without sacrifice or sacred pillar, they will not have any religious places of worship. And without ephod or household idols. All that's going to be gone. Afterward, the sons of Israel will return and seek Yahweh their God and David their king. Remember, those were things that the northern kingdom had given up when they split from the southern kingdom. And if Hosea finishes by saying, and they will come trembling to the Lord and to his goodness in the last days, implying a regathering of the northern kingdom's people, their offspring, many years in the future, of course. The key here is the hope of a regathering of Israel and her restoration to dominion. Remember, Israel at the time that the northern kingdom was destroyed was very prosperous, very secure, she thought, and in charge of their region. But that's going to be restored someday. Between the nations' destruction in 722 BC and her restoration in the end times will be a time when God appears to have walked away and the Gentiles appear to be dominant. And let's go back to Micah 3:4. But then they, the Israelites, will cry out to Yahweh, but he will not answer them. Instead, he will hide his face from them at the time, because they have practiced evil deeds. So God will turn his back on Israel for a break during a period of judgment. Zechariah even gets involved here. Zechariah 10:10, I will bring them back from the land of Egypt and gather them from Assyria, and I will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon until no room can be found for them. What's he saying? I'm going to bring all my people back at that time, sometime way in the future, again in the end days, and I'm going to bring them back and fill up beyond the normal bounds of Israel even. There will be so many that I bring back, they're going to fill up other lands. Gilead, which would be on the east side of the Jordan, and Lebanon, which would be to the north of the normal boundaries for Israel. Isaiah, don't count him out either. Isaiah 11, verses 11 through 16. Then it will appear on that day that the Lord will again recover the second time with his hand the remnant of his people who will remain from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. In other words, God said he's going to put both his hands out. He will cover his own people, the remnant of his people, not all people, but the remnant of his people, and he will return them. He will lift up a standard for the nations and will assemble the banished ones of Israel, the remnant that's been dispersed, and will gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Isaiah was writing to and about Judah. Verse 13, we continue here, got several more verses. Then the jealousy of Ephraim will depart, and those who harass Judah will be cut off. The nations that oppose Judah will be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah. The northern-southern split will be over, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. The nation will be reunited at this time. They will swoop down on the slopes of the Philistines on the west. Together they will plunder the sons of the east. They will possess Edom and Moab. They're taken over all the territory around them. And the sons of Ammon will be subject to them. And Yahweh will utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt. And he will wave his hands over the river, that'd be the Euphrates, with his scorching wind. He will strike it in 7 streams and make men walk over dry shod. And there will be a highway, this is verse 16, there will be a highway from Assyria for the remnant of Yahweh's people who will be left, just as there was for Israel. In that day they came up out of the land of Egypt. So he's saying at some time there's going to be something like the second Exodus, where everybody is going to be brought from all over the world, just as they were brought up from Egypt into Canaan. God said, I'm going to gather my people from all over the world, and I'm going to bring them back to the promised land. So many, they'll overflow the land. But after that gap of time is over, Micah says, going back to Micah 5:4, and he, the Messiah, will arise and shepherd his flock in the strength of Yahweh, because he will be Yahweh, of course, in the majesty of the name of Yahweh his God, and they will remain, because at that time he, the Messiah, will be great to the ends of the earth. Yahweh is going to come back and rule the entire world. Back in chapter 4, Micah had given us a heads up about the pagan worship of the nations. Israel's turning to walk with Yahweh, followed by the nations turning to Yahweh. Not just Israel, the nations. Let's go back and look at Micah 4, verse 5. Remember, this is the thing that Micah is doing. He is repeating things he has said and giving a little more detail as he does. Because back in chapter 4, verse 5, he said, though all the peoples walk, each in the name of his God, that's pagan idol people, as for us, we will walk in the name of Yahweh, our God, forever and ever. Micah had already told us that Israel, as a nation, a unified nation, would return to Yahweh and walk obediently with him. And when they do that, peoples all over the world will be speaking and worshiping their own individual gods. And then later we're going to find that will change, and those nations will turn to Yahweh as well. So Micah's been hinting at these things all the way along. Micah, or the Messiah rather, will come in his power to his own people in that last time, that last days, those last days, the last epoch. And he's going to come in the 1,000-year range. He's going to come to begin a 1,000-year reign, the Messiah will. He will be the shepherd king spoken of in Zechariah, and he will come by Yahweh, spoken of as what Yahweh in Isaiah. So Zechariah is going to call him the shepherd king. Isaiah will call him Yahweh. Look at Isaiah 9:6. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders. He's speaking about the 1,000-year reign, I believe, at this time. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. You can't be a mighty God without being eternal. You can't be an eternal Father without being eternal. You will not also be Prince of Peace, Wonderful Counselor, without being God himself. And for Jerusalem, Zechariah 14:11. And this is talking about the end days again. And people will live in it, that's in Jerusalem, and there will be no more curse. The judgment will be over. For Jerusalem will dwell in security. After the Messiah's victory, the words of Deuteronomy will be known experientially. The people will experience what was promised in Deuteronomy 33:27. The eternal God is a dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. And he drove out the enemy from before you. That was a description of coming out of Israel, but it also has, as a second instance, I believe, the return to Israel in the last days. Revelation 1:8 adds, I am the Alpha and the Omega. We know who that is. Says the Lord God, who is, who was, and who is to come, the Almighty. And down in Malachi 1:11, moving back to the Old Testament, for from the rising of the sun even to its setting, my name, Yahweh, will be great among the nations, and in every place incense is going to be offered to my name, to Yahweh's name, and a grain offering that is pure for my name will be great among the nations, says Yahweh of hosts. What's he saying? Malachi is prophesying that all the nations will burn incense and worship Yahweh. Well, we're going to continue because the tone changes slightly next time as we look at verses 5 through 9, I think it is, in chapter